The smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the small cafe as morning light filtered through the windows. Rachel wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that week. Her apron was stained with coffee from the breakfast rush, and her feet ached in those non-slip shoes she'd bought 3 years ago when she first started working here. The Blue Haven Cafe wasn't much to look at. It sat squeezed between a dry cleaner and a tax office on a busy Los Angeles street. Most people walked right past it without a second glance. But for Rachel, this place had become something like a second home. Not because she loved it exactly, but because it was safe, predictable. No surprises, no disappointments. She was 28 now, and sometimes she'd catch herself wondering where all those years had gone. Wasn't it just yesterday she'd been sitting in a college practice room, staying up until 2 in the morning perfecting a Chopin piece? Wasn't it just last week she'd performed at her graduation recital, her heart pounding with excitement about all the possibilities ahead? But that was 6 years ago. 6 years that somehow felt both like forever and no time at all. "Coffee, hon," Rachel called out to the regular sitting by the window. Mr. Patterson came in every single day at 8:30, ordered the same thing, read his newspaper, and left exactly 45 minutes later. "You could set your watch by him, please," he said without looking up. Rachel poured the coffee and delivered it with a practiced smile. This was her life now. Comfortable, safe, boring. The owner of the cafe, Mrs. Chen, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh pastries. She was a small woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She'd given Rachel this job when nobody else would, right after the music thing didn't work out. "You okay, Rachel?" Mrs. Chen asked, setting down the tray. "You look tired." "I'm fine," Rachel said automatically. She'd gotten good at saying that. The truth was more complicated. Rachel had graduated with a degree in piano performance, full of dreams about concert halls and recording studios. She'd imagined herself on stage, lost in the music, sharing something beautiful with the world. But the real world didn't work like that. There were 1,000 other pianists just as good, just as hopeful. Auditions led nowhere. Teaching positions went to people with more experience. The bills kept coming, so she'd taken this job telling herself it was temporary. Just until she got her foot in the door somewhere. Just until the right opportunity came along. But opportunities had a way of not coming along, and temporary had a way of becoming permanent. The morning crowd thinned out around 10. Rachel busied herself refilling napkin dispensers and organizing menus, anything to keep her hands moving. That's when she noticed it again. The piano. It sat in the corner near the window, looking almost out of place among the simple tables and chairs. Mrs. Chen had gotten it 2 weeks ago from a music school that was closing down. "Adds character," she'd said when the delivery guys brought it in. Rachel had been avoiding it. Every time she walked past, she felt something twist in her chest. It was like seeing an old friend you'd abandoned, someone who reminded you of all your broken promises to yourself. She'd touched it once, just once, late one evening after closing. Her fingers had found middle C almost automatically, and just that single note had been enough to make her eyes sting with tears. She'd pulled her hand back like the keys were hot and hadn't gone near it since. The lunch rush came and went. Rachel served sandwiches and salads, cleared tables, ran the register. A woman complained her soup was too cold. A businessman left his laptop behind and came running back for it. Normal stuff. Forgettable stuff. Around 3 o'clock, when the cafe was nearly empty, the door chimed and a group of people walked in carrying equipment. Cameras, microphones, those big reflector things. Rachel recognized them as a film crew, probably shooting something for TV or YouTube. A tall woman with glasses and a clipboard approached the counter. "Hi there. We're filming a documentary about everyday Los Angeles. We got permission from the owner to shoot some footage here. That okay?" Rachel glanced at Mrs. Chen, who nodded enthusiastically from the kitchen doorway. Of course she'd agreed. Mrs. Chen never said no to anything that might bring in more customers. "Sure," Rachel said. "Just try not to get in people's way." The crew set up their equipment while Rachel went back to work. They filmed the cafe from different angles, interviewed Mrs. Chen about how long she'd owned the place, got some shots of the street outside. Rachel mostly ignored them. She'd lived in LA long enough to know that cameras were just part of the background noise. But she could feel them watching her sometimes as she moved between tables. It made her self-conscious, aware of every movement. She kept her head down and focused on her work. The afternoon dragged on. The crew kept filming, moving their lights and cameras around, having quiet conversations about angles and lighting. Rachel noticed one of them. A middle-aged man with graying hair kept looking at the piano in the corner. He seemed interested in it, taking several shots from different positions. "Does anyone play that?" he asked during a quiet moment. Rachel felt her stomach tighten. "It's just for decoration," she said quickly. Mrs. Chen, overhearing from across the room, laughed. "Rachel plays. She's wonderful. Studied music in college." Rachel shot her a look that said, "Please don't," but Mrs. Chen just smiled innocently. The director looked at Rachel with renewed interest. "Really, would you play something for us? It would be great for the documentary. You know, real people doing real things. That's what we're after." "I don't really play anymore," Rachel said, feeling her face flush. "I'm pretty rusty." "Come on," Mrs. Chen urged. "Just one song. When was the last time you played?" Too long, Rachel thought. Way too long. The director sensed her hesitation. "No pressure," he said. "But it would really add something special to the piece. The whole point of our documentary is capturing authentic moments. A waitress who used to be a musician? That's a real story." Rachel looked at the piano. Part of her wanted to run out of the cafe and never come back. But another part, a part she'd been trying to ignore for years, felt a pull toward those keys. How long had it been? 3 years? 4? "I'm really not very good anymore," she said weakly. "That's okay," the director said warmly. "We're not looking for perfect. We're looking for real." The cafe had only 2 other customers at this point, both absorbed in their laptops. Mrs. Chen was watching her with encouraging eyes. The film crew waited patiently. Rachel took a deep breath. Maybe it would be good to play again, just once, just to prove to herself that she could walk away from it without falling apart. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Just one piece, though." She untied her apron with shaking hands and walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavy, like she was walking toward something she'd been running from for years. The crew quickly adjusted their cameras, but Rachel barely noticed. All she could see was the piano waiting there like it had been waiting all this time just for her. She sat down on the bench. The wood was smooth and cool beneath her. She lifted the fallboard and looked at the keys. Ivory and black, perfectly familiar, like a language she used to speak fluently. Rachel placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she let herself remember what it felt like to make music. Rachel's hands hovered over the keys for what felt like an eternity. The cafe seemed to hold its breath around her. She could feel the camera pointed in her direction, could sense Mrs. Chen and the film crew watching, but somehow it all faded into the background. Her fingers found their position almost automatically. Muscle memory was a strange thing. You could abandon something for years, convince yourself you'd forgotten it. But the body remembered. The heart remembered. She started to play. The piece that came out wasn't something famous or classical. It wasn't something she'd learned from a teacher or practiced for a recital. It was something she'd written herself, late one night about 4 years ago. The worst night of her life, actually. Her mom had died 3 months earlier. Cancer. The aggressive kind that didn't give you time to prepare, didn't give you time to say all the things you needed to say. Rachel had been sitting in her tiny apartment, unable to sleep, unable to cry anymore, unable to do anything except feel this enormous weight of grief pressing down on her chest. She'd gone to the old keyboard she kept in the corner and just started playing. The music had come from somewhere deep inside, somewhere she didn't even know existed. It was all the things she couldn't put into words. The love, the loss, the anger, the confusion, the desperate wish to have just 5 more minutes. She'd never played it for anyone. She'd never even written it down properly. It lived in her fingers and nowhere else. But now, sitting at this old donated piano in a small cafe with cameras rolling, it poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Her eyes closed and she let herself feel everything again. The hospital smell, the way her mom's hand felt in hers, the sound of the heart monitor going flat, the impossible silence afterward. The music wasn't perfect. Her technique was rusty. She missed a note here and there, but it was honest, raw, real. The melody started soft and fragile, like the first days after the funeral when Rachel couldn't quite believe her mom was really gone. Then it built slowly, becoming more complex, more insistent. There were moments of anger, sharp dissonant chords that crashed together. There were moments of sweetness, too. Memories of good times floating up through the grief. The middle section was almost frantic, like searching desperately for something you'd lost, and then, toward the end, something shifted. The music became quieter again, but different than before. Not fragile now, but accepting. Peaceful almost. It was the sound of learning to live with a hole in your heart. The sound of understanding that grief and love were really the same thing, just viewed from different angles. The final notes hung in the air. Rachel kept her eyes closed for a moment longer, not quite ready to return to the real world. When she finally opened them and looked up, she was startled by what she saw. The director had tears streaming down his face. He wasn't even trying to hide it. The camera operator was wiping her eyes with her sleeve. Mrs. Chen was crying openly, clutching a dish towel to her chest. Even the two laptop customers had looked up from their screens, and one of them was dabbing at her eyes. Rachel felt embarrassed suddenly. She'd gotten too carried away, too emotional. She'd forgotten about being professional and appropriate. She'd just vomited her feelings all over this cafe while strangers filmed it. "I'm sorry," she started to say. "That was probably too—" "Don't you dare apologize," the director interrupted, his voice thick. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years." The camera operator nodded enthusiastically, still wiping her eyes. "I can't even explain what that made me feel. It was like you were playing my own emotions." Mrs. Chen came over and put her hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Your mother would be so proud," she whispered. Rachel felt her own eyes fill with tears then. She'd been holding it together, but those words broke something loose inside her. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The director composed himself, clearing his throat. "Would you mind if we use that in the documentary? That footage?" "Sure," Rachel said, her voice small. "If you want." She couldn't imagine why anyone would want to watch a waitress playing piano in an empty cafe, but if it helped their project, why not? It's not like anyone would ever see it anyway. These documentary things usually ended up with a few thousand views on some streaming platform, before disappearing into the digital void. The crew packed up their equipment shortly after, thanking Mrs. Chen profusely, and telling Rachel again how moving her performance had been. Then they were gone, and the cafe fell back into its normal, quiet rhythm. Rachel tried to go back to work, but she felt different somehow. Playing that piece had cracked something open inside her, something she'd been keeping carefully sealed for years. She moved through the rest of her shift in a daze, her mind only half on refilling coffee cups and wiping down tables. That night, alone in her apartment, she sat at her old keyboard. She'd kept it covered with a sheet for the past 2 years, like covering a mirror in a house of mourning. Now she pulled the sheet off and looked at it. Dust had settled on the keys. She sat down and played her mother's song again. Then she played other things, pieces she'd learned in college, improvised melodies that came from nowhere. Her fingers were stiff and unpracticed, but the joy of it surprised her. When had she forgotten that music could feel like this? Not like work or pressure or failure, but like coming home. She played until midnight, until her neighbors knocked on the wall, until her fingers cramped. Then she sat in the dark, staring at the keyboard, and wondered what the hell she'd been doing with her life. The next day was Tuesday, her day off. She slept late, made coffee, tried to do normal Tuesday things. But she kept thinking about the piano, about how it felt to play again, about the look on the director's face. Around noon, her phone started buzzing. A text from her old college roommate. "OMG, is this you?" Attached was a link. Rachel clicked it, confused. It led to a social media post from the documentary filmmaker. He'd posted a short clip of her playing at the cafe. Just 30 seconds of the performance, but it captured the emotional core of the piece. The caption read, "Sometimes the most beautiful art happens when nobody's watching. We met this incredible musician today, working as a waitress at a small cafe in LA. She hasn't played in years, but agreed to perform for our documentary. What came out was pure magic. This is what real talent looks like." Rachel stared at her phone. The post had been up for less than 24 hours. It already had 50,000 views. She refreshed the page. 60,000 now. The comments were pouring in. People from all over the world sharing their own stories of loss and grief, talking about how the music had made them cry, asking who she was, wanting to hear more. Rachel set her phone down, her hands shaking slightly. This was just a fluke, right? Some random thing that would fade away by tomorrow. The internet moved fast. People would forget about it. But the phone kept buzzing. More texts coming in. Friends she hadn't heard from in years. Her old piano teacher. Her aunt in Chicago. Everyone had seen it. By Wednesday morning, the video had 2 million views. By Wednesday evening, 5 million. People were sharing it everywhere, adding their own captions, talking about how it had moved them to tears. Then the celebrities started sharing it. Rachel was at work, wiping down tables during the afternoon lull, when Mrs. Chen burst out of the kitchen waving her phone. Rachel, do you know who Melissa Grant is? Of course Rachel knew who Melissa Grant was. Everyone did. She was one of the biggest pop stars in the world, had won like 6 Grammys, sold out stadiums. She shared your video, Mrs. Chen practically shouted. Look. Rachel took the phone with trembling hands. There it was. Melissa Grant, verified account with 15 million followers, had shared the video of Rachel playing piano. Her caption read, "I've been having a rough week, and somehow the algorithm showed me this at exactly the right moment. I've watched it 5 times and cried every single time. This is what music is supposed to be. Raw, honest healing. Thank you to whoever this beautiful soul is." Rachel sat down hard in the nearest chair. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But her phone was exploding now. Notifications flooding in faster than she could read them. More celebrities sharing the video. A famous actor, a comedian, a news anchor. All of them talking about how the piece had moved them, made them cry, reminded them why they love music. The video hit 10 million views, then 20 million. Rachel's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The cafe was filling up with people now, not regular customers but strangers with their phones out, trying to get a glimpse of the piano waitress. Mrs. Chen looked thrilled and overwhelmed in equal measure. Someone from a record label called. Then another. A talent agent left a voicemail. A concert promoter sent an email. Rachel locked herself in the cafe bathroom and tried to breathe. This morning she'd been a nobody waitress in a nowhere cafe. Now millions of people around the world had watched her play her mother's song. Celebrities were crying over her music. It was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. But underneath the panic, underneath the disbelief, there was something else. Something small but growing. A tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the second chance she'd stopped believing in. The line outside the Blue Haven Cafe stretched around the block. Rachel stood at the window, coffee pot in hand, staring at the crowd with a mixture of disbelief and something close to fear. It had been 3 days since the video went viral. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Her email inbox had exploded with messages from strangers, journalists, music industry people, fans. The word fan still felt ridiculous to her. She was a waitress. Waitresses didn't have fans. But these people standing in line, they were here for her, hoping to catch a glimpse, hoping to hear her play. Some of them held signs. One said, "You made me cry in the best way." Another said, "Play for us." Mrs. Chen was in heaven. The cafe had done more business in the past 3 days than in the previous 3 months. Every table was full. People ordering coffee and pastries they barely touched, just sitting there waiting, watching Rachel like she was some kind of exhibit. "You should play for them," Mrs. Chen suggested for the 20th time. "I'm working," Rachel said automatically. But the truth was more complicated. She was terrified. That performance in the video had been private, raw, unplanned. The idea of sitting down at that piano with hundreds of eyes on her, phones recording, expectations hanging in the air like smoke, it made her stomach twist into knots. A man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd and came to the counter. He handed Rachel a business card. "I'm David Torres. I represent several major artists. I'd love to talk to you about your future." Rachel looked at the card. It had his name, a fancy logo, a phone number. "I'm just a waitress," she said weakly. With 20 million views and counting, he said with a smile, "You're much more than a waitress now. You just don't know it yet." He left the card on the counter and walked out. Rachel stared at it like it might explode. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. She'd stopped reading them all because there were just too many. But this one caught her eye because it was from her old music theory professor, Dr. Williams. "Rachel, I always knew you had something special. Don't let fear keep you from sharing your gift with the world. Your mother would want you to do this. I believe in you." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. She excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door, and let herself cry for a few minutes. Everything was happening too fast. Too big. She wasn't ready for this. She hadn't asked for this. When she came back out, there was a woman sitting at the counter who made Rachel stop in her tracks. She recognized her immediately. Olivia Chen. Not related to Mrs. Chen, just the same last name. Olivia Chen, the film composer. The one who'd won an Oscar 3 years ago. The one whose music Rachel had studied in college. Whose scores she'd analyzed and admired. "Hi," Olivia said simply. "I hope it's okay that I came. I saw your video." Rachel couldn't speak. She just nodded like an idiot. "Can we talk?" Olivia asked. "Maybe somewhere quieter?" Mrs. Chen practically pushed Rachel toward the back office. Go. I'll handle the floor." In the small cluttered office, surrounded by invoices and coffee supplies, Rachel sat across from one of her musical heroes and tried to process reality. "I've watched your video probably 30 times, Olivia said. "I keep going back to it." "Do you know why?" Rachel shook her head. "Because it's honest," Olivia continued. "I work in an industry where everything is polished and produced and perfected until sometimes the soul gets squeezed out of it. What you played, that piece, it still had its soul. You can't fake that kind of emotion. You can't manufacture that kind of truth." "I was just playing something I wrote when my mom died," Rachel said quietly. "I didn't think anyone would care." "That's exactly why people care," Olivia said. "You weren't trying to impress anyone. You weren't performing. You were just feeling something and letting it come out through music. That's what all the great composers do, you know. They take human experience and translate it into sound." Rachel looked down at her hands. Her server hands with the calluses and the small burn mark from that time she grabbed a hot plate wrong. "I'm getting calls from record labels," she said. "Agents, venues, I don't know what to do. This isn't my life. My life is serving coffee and going home and being nobody." "Is that really the life you want?" Olivia asked gently. The question hung in the air. Rachel thought about her tiny apartment with the covered keyboard. The bills she paid working doubles at the cafe. The dreams she'd packed away like old photographs in a box under the bed. "I wanted to be a musician," Rachel admitted. "That's all I ever wanted. But it didn't work out. I auditioned for everything. Nothing happened, so I gave up." "Nothing happened then," Olivia corrected. "But something's happening now. You have an opportunity that most musicians would kill for. 20 million people have heard your music." 20 million? Do you understand how rare that is?" "But I only have one piece," Rachel said. "That song about my mom. I haven't composed anything else in years." "What if that's all I have? What if I'm just a one-hit wonder or whatever they call it?" Olivia smiled. "You really think that's the only music inside you?" "Rachel, grief is just one human emotion. There are hundreds more. Joy, fear, love, confusion, hope, anger, peace. You have a whole lifetime of experiences to draw from. That's not a dried-up well. That's an ocean." Someone knocked on the office door. Mrs. Chen poked her head in, looking apologetic. "Rachel, there's a news crew here. Channel 7, they want to interview you." Rachel felt panic rising again. "Tell them I can't." "You're going to have to face this eventually," Olivia said. "The attention isn't going away. The question is what you're going to do with it." The next few hours passed in a blur. Rachel agreed to a short interview which felt completely surreal. The reporter asked about her background, her mother, what the piece meant to her. Rachel stumbled through answers, feeling awkward and exposed under the bright camera lights. But when they asked her to play, something interesting happened. She sat at the piano, and the crowd in the cafe went completely silent. Every phone came up, recording, and Rachel realized something. These people weren't here to judge her. They were here because the music had touched them. They wanted to feel that again, so she played. Not the same piece, but something new. Something that came from this moment, this strange, overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying moment. It started uncertain, questioning like she felt, but it built into something stronger, something that said, "Yes, I'm scared, but I'm here anyway." When she finished, the entire cafe erupted in applause. People were crying again. The reporter was wiping her eyes, and Rachel felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe this was real. Maybe this was actually happening. That evening, after the cafe closed and the crowd finally dispersed, Rachel sat alone at the piano. She played for hours, not for cameras or audiences, just for herself. Pieces she remembered from college, improvisations, new melodies that surprised her by appearing under her fingers. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but something made her look. Hi Rachel, this is Jennifer Wu. You might know me as the actress. I saw your video and I couldn't stop crying. I lost my dad last year and I've been stuck in this grief that I couldn't move through. Your music helped me feel it in a way I hadn't been able to before. I know this is random, but I wanted to say thank you. You gave me something I needed. Rachel read the message 3 times. Jennifer Wu. The Jennifer Wu who'd been nominated for 3 Oscars, who starred in that drama everyone had talked about last year. More messages came in. A comedian she'd seen on late-night TV talking about how the piece had moved him. A novelist describing how the music had inspired her. A scientist who said he'd listened to it on repeat while working through a difficult problem. These weren't just celebrities. They were human beings who'd felt something. Her music had reached across the distance and touched them in a real way. Rachel opened her laptop and looked at her bank account. She had about $800 to her name. Rent was due in a week. She had bills piled up on her kitchen counter. The responsible thing would be to keep her head down, keep serving coffee, keep being safe. But Olivia's words echoed in her mind. Is that really the life you want? She picked up the business card that the agent had left. David Torres. She stared at it for a long time. Then she did something that terrified her. She called the number. He answered on the second ring. David Torres. Hi, this is Rachel. The waitress. The piano one. From the video, she was rambling. I don't know what I'm doing, but I think maybe I want to try. The music thing. If the offer is still there. There was a pause. Then his voice came through, warm and professional. The offer is definitely still there. Can you meet tomorrow? Let's talk about what comes next. After they hung up, Rachel sat in her apartment in the dark, her heart pounding. She'd just jumped off a cliff. No safety net. No guarantee this would work out, but for the first time in years she felt alive. Her phone lit up with another notification. The video had hit 30 million views. Under it, thousands of new comments from people all over the world. People in Japan, Brazil, Norway, South Africa, all of them saying some version of the same thing. This music made me feel less alone. Rachel closed her eyes and thought about her mother. About the night she'd written that piece alone in her grief, thinking no one would ever hear it, and now 30 million people had heard it, had felt something because of it. Maybe that's what music was supposed to do. Not be perfect or impressive or technically flawless. Just reach across the dark and remind people they weren't alone in whatever they were feeling. She went to bed that night with no idea what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a very long time, she was actually curious to find out. David Torres had an office that made Rachel feel small. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles. Modern furniture that probably cost more than her car. Awards and platinum records on the walls from artists he represented. She sat in a leather chair that was too big for her, holding a cup of coffee she was too nervous to drink. So here's what's happening, David said, sitting across from her with a tablet in his hands. We've had inquiries from 3 major record labels. 2 want to sign you immediately. The 3rd wants to hear more first, but they're interested. We've also got booking requests from venues across the country. Small clubs, theaters, even a couple of bigger spaces. And the press wants you. Talk shows, podcasts, magazines. Everyone wants the story of the waitress who made celebrities cry. Rachel felt dizzy. That's a lot. It is, David agreed. And we need to be smart about this. The attention you're getting right now, it's lightning in a bottle. But lightning doesn't last. We need to turn this moment into something sustainable. A real career. I only have 1 song, Rachel said quietly. It was the thing that kept her up at night. What if that's all I've got? What if I sit down to write and nothing comes out? David leaned forward. Do you know how many artists I've worked with who have that exact fear? All of them. Every single one. The fear doesn't go away. You just have to work anyway. He pulled up something on his tablet and turned it toward her. It was a comment thread from her video, thousands of responses long. Look at what people are saying. They're not talking about perfect technique or flawless execution. They're talking about how you made them feel. That's your gift, Rachel. You translate emotion into music. And trust me, you've got a lot more emotions left to explore. She looked at the comments, people sharing stories about their own losses, their own grief. Others talking about how the music had helped them through breakups, job losses, illness, loneliness. One person wrote, I haven't cried in 3 years. This broke something open in me. Thank you. But what if I mess it up? Rachel asked. What if I try to write something new and it's terrible? What if I let all these people down? Then you mess it up, David said simply. You're human. You're allowed to make bad art sometimes. Not everything you create has to be a viral video watched by millions. Some of it can just be practice. Some of it can just be you figuring things out. Rachel thought about that. She'd spent so many years being afraid of failure that she'd stopped trying altogether. Safer to quit than to fail, right? But maybe David had a point. Maybe the real failure was never trying at all. What would I have to do? She asked. David's eyes lit up. This was his territory. First, we get you out of the cafe. I know that sounds harsh, but you can't build a music career working full-time as a waitress. You need time to compose, to practice, to develop your craft. Second, we record an album. Not in some fancy studio with 100 producers trying to make you sound like everyone else. Somewhere intimate, authentic. We capture what made that video special. Third, we book some small shows. Let people experience your music live. Build a real connection with an audience. I don't have money to quit my job, Rachel said. I have rent, bills, student loans. That's what an advance is for, David explained. The record label gives you money up front against future earnings. It's not a gift, it's essentially a loan you pay back with album sales. But it gives you the breathing room to focus on the music. Rachel's hands were shaking slightly. This was real. This was actually real. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, David said. That means you care. The day you're not scared is the day you've stopped putting your heart into it. They spent the next hour going over details. Contract terms, timelines, expectations. Rachel's head was spinning by the end of it. When she left his office, she felt like she'd just signed up for something that was either going to change her life or destroy it. Maybe both. She went to the cafe for her shift, but her mind was elsewhere. Mrs. Chen noticed immediately. You're going to leave, Mrs. Chen said. It wasn't a question. I'm sorry, Rachel said. I don't want to leave you hanging, but Mrs. Chen held up a hand. Don't apologize. I'm not angry. I'm proud. You think I want you serving coffee forever when you could be making music? What kind of person would that make me? Rachel felt tears threatening. You gave me a job when I needed one. You've been so good to me. And you've been a wonderful employee, Mrs. Chen said. But Rachel, this is your chance. You have to take it. Your mother would tell you the same thing if she was here. The mention of her mother made the tears spill over. Mrs. Chen hugged her, this tiny woman barely reaching Rachel's shoulder, and somehow it felt like the hug Rachel needed most. That evening, Rachel went to visit her mother's grave for the first time in months. She sat on the grass next to the headstone and talked out loud, feeling only slightly ridiculous. So I guess I'm doing this, Mom. The music thing. I know you always wanted me to keep playing, and I'm sorry I stopped. I was just so scared of failing, of not being good enough. But something weird happened. That piece I wrote for you, the one I played that night when I couldn't stop crying, people heard it. Millions of people. And it meant something to them. A breeze rustled the trees around her. Rachel pulled her knees up to her chest. I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up. What if I can't write anything else? What if that was my one good piece? What if I get up on stage in front of people and freeze? What if I sign this contract and then discover I'm not actually good enough? She sat in silence for a moment, listening to the wind. But I think maybe I have to try anyway, because the alternative is going back to pretending I'm okay with a life I don't want. And I'm so tired of pretending, Mom. I'm so tired of being scared. The wind picked up and Rachel could almost hear her mother's voice. Not really, obviously, but in her memory, in her heart. Her mom had always told her that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and doing the thing anyway. Okay, Rachel said out loud. I'm doing it. The next week was a whirlwind. Rachel gave her 2 weeks' notice at the cafe, though Mrs. Chen insisted she could leave immediately. She met with lawyers to review the contract David had negotiated. She signed papers that made her feel simultaneously adult and like a child playing dress-up. And then came the hardest part, sitting down to write new music. She set up in her apartment with her keyboard, a notebook, and a level of self-doubt that threatened to swallow her whole. For the first 2 days, nothing came. She'd sit at the keys, place her fingers in position, and then just freeze. Every note sounded wrong. Every melody felt forced. By the 3rd day, she was in full panic mode. She called Olivia Chen, the composer, who'd given her a number and said to reach out any time. I can't do it, Rachel said as soon as Olivia answered. I've been sitting here for 3 days and I can't write anything. It's all garbage. I knew this would happen. I knew I was a one-hit wonder. Okay, stop, Olivia said calmly. First of all, 3 days is nothing. Sometimes I sit with an idea for weeks before anything good comes out. Second, you're trying too hard. You're thinking about all the people who are going to hear it. All the expectations, all the pressure. That's not how you wrote the first piece, is it? No, Rachel admitted. I wasn't thinking at all. I was just feeling. Exactly, so stop thinking. What are you feeling right now? Right this second? Rachel closed her eyes. Scared. Overwhelmed. Like I'm standing on the edge of something huge and I don't know if I'm going to fly or fall. Good, Olivia said. Play that. Don't worry about it being perfect or commercial or impressive. Just play what it feels like to be scared and excited and overwhelmed all at once. After they hung up, Rachel sat at her keyboard for a long moment. Then she started to play, tentative at first, uncertain. The notes reflected her anxiety, her self-doubt. But as she kept going, something shifted. The uncertainty turned into something else. Anticipation, possibility. The scary kind of excited feeling you get before something big happens. The piece was messy and imperfect. But it was honest. It was her. She worked on it for hours, refining, exploring, letting it evolve. By the time she looked up, it was dark outside and she'd created something new. Not as immediately emotional as her mother's piece, but just as true. She recorded it on her phone and sent it to David. He called her 10 minutes later. That's it. That's the sound. Rachel, this is going to work. Over the next few weeks, Rachel wrote 5 more pieces. Each one came from a different emotional place. One was about the terror and joy of taking risks. Another was about loneliness, the specific kind you feel in a crowded room. One was about hope, tentative and fragile but growing stronger. They weren't all perfect. Some of them needed work, but they were real. They were her truth translated into music. The record label booked studio time at a small, intimate space in Silver Lake. Nothing fancy or overwhelming. Just Rachel, a beautiful piano, and a sound engineer who knew how to capture the raw quality that made her music special. The day of her first recording session, Rachel woke up at 5 in the morning, too nervous to sleep. She dressed carefully, as if the right outfit would somehow make her more legitimate. She drove to the studio with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. This was it. The moment where she either proved she could do this or failed spectacularly in front of everyone who'd believed in her. She walked into the studio, saw the gorgeous grand piano waiting for her, and took a deep breath. Time to find out if the waitress could really be a musician. The studio felt different from what Rachel had imagined. She'd pictured something cold and sterile, all technology and buttons and intimidating equipment, but this space was warm. Soft lighting, wood floors, and windows that let in the morning sun. The grand piano sat in the center like a throne waiting for its queen. Tom, the sound engineer, was a guy in his 40s with kind eyes and an easy smile. He showed her around, explained how everything worked, but in a way that didn't make her feel stupid for not knowing. The goal here is to capture you, he said. Not some polished version or what we think people want to hear. Just you, being honest. That's what made the original video special. Rachel sat at the piano and ran her fingers over the keys. It was a beautiful instrument, probably worth more than every possession she owned combined. The sound it made was rich and full, each note resonating perfectly. Whenever you're ready, Tom said from the control booth. No pressure. We've got all day. Rachel started with her mother's piece, the one that had started everything. She'd played it so many times now, but it still made her emotional. Every time she played it, she found something new in it. Some shade of feeling she hadn't noticed before. When she finished, Tom's voice came through the speakers. That was beautiful, but I could hear you holding back a little, like you were being careful. Can you try it again, but this time forget I'm here? Forget the microphones. Just play it like you're alone. It was harder than it sounded. Knowing someone was listening, knowing it was being recorded, it made her self-conscious. But she closed her eyes, thought about her mom, about that night 4 years ago when she'd written this piece, and let herself go there again. This time it was different, rawer, more vulnerable. She made a few technical mistakes, but they didn't matter. The emotion was there. Perfect, Tom said when she finished. That's the one. They spent the rest of the day recording. Each piece came with its own challenges. Some flowed easily. Others required take after take until Rachel found the right emotional space for them. By the time they finished, Rachel was exhausted but also exhilarated. She'd actually done it. Recorded an album? Well, 6 songs. Apparently that was enough for an EP, which was what they'd decided to release first. Test the waters before committing to a full album. David called her that evening. Tom sent over the rough mixes. Rachel, they're incredible. Exactly what we hoped for. Now comes the next part. We need to get you in front of people. Live performances. The thought made Rachel's stomach drop. Already? Strike while the iron's hot, David said. The video is still circulating. You're still a hot topic. We've got offers from venues wanting to book you. Small places, intimate settings. 200 seats or less. It's perfect for what you do. 200 people felt like a lot, but Rachel heard herself agreeing anyway. What was the point of all this if she was too scared to actually perform? The first show was booked at a small music venue in downtown LA. The Velvet Room, it was called. A place known for featuring up-and-coming artists. The tickets sold out in 45 minutes. Rachel spent the week before the show practicing, panicking, and second-guessing everything. What would she wear? What would she say between songs? What if she froze? What if people were disappointed when they saw her in person? Mrs. Chen came to one of her practice sessions at the cafe, which she still visited regularly even though she didn't work there anymore. You're overthinking, Mrs. Chen said, watching Rachel practice for the 100th time. These people aren't coming to judge you. They're coming because your music touched them. They just want to experience that in person. The night of the show arrived too quickly. Rachel stood backstage at the Velvet Room, peeking through the curtain at the packed house. Every seat was filled. People stood in the back. She recognized some faces from the cafe, regulars who'd come to support her, but most were strangers all waiting to hear her play. 5 minutes, the stage manager said. Rachel thought she might throw up. David appeared at her side, putting a hand on her shoulder. You've got this. Just do what you did in that cafe. Be yourself, be honest. That's all anyone wants, easy for him to say. He wasn't the one about to walk out onto a stage, but then she thought about her mother. About all those conversations they'd had about following your dreams, being brave enough to be vulnerable in front of people. Her mom had always believed in her, even when Rachel didn't believe in herself. For you, Mom, she whispered. She walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Rachel had to blink back tears as she made her way to the piano. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces staring back at her. Hi, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I'm Rachel. Some of you might know me as the waitress from that video. I'm still kind of processing that any of this is real. A few people in the audience laughed sympathetically. I want to start with the piece that started everything, Rachel continued. I wrote it 4 years ago after my mom died. It's called The Space You Left Behind. I never thought anyone else would hear it. The fact that so many of you connected with it means more than I can say. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The room went completely silent. Rachel lost herself in the music, forgot about the audience, forgot about her nerves. She was back in her apartment at 2 a.m, grieving, searching for a way to express the inexpressible. When the piece ended, the silence continued for a beat. Then applause erupted, loud and sustained. People were crying. Rachel could see them, tears streaming down faces, and she felt that connection she'd felt watching the video comments. Her pain had somehow helped other people process their own pain. She played all 6 songs from her EP. Between pieces, she talked a little about what inspired each one. She wasn't smooth or polished, stumbled over her words sometimes, but the audience didn't seem to mind. If anything, her awkwardness made her more relatable. For the final song, she did something unplanned. She looked out at the audience and said, I want to try something new. I've been working on a piece about this whole experience, about going from serving coffee to standing on this stage, about being terrified but doing it anyway. It's not finished and it's definitely not perfect, but I'd like to share it with you. She started playing, making up parts as she went, improvising around the themes she'd been exploring. The piece captured the uncertainty, the fear, the excitement, the overwhelming strangeness of her life right now. It wasn't as emotionally devastating as her mother's piece, but it was joyful in places, hopeful, alive with possibility. The audience loved it. When she finished, they gave her a standing ovation that lasted so long she didn't know what to do except stand and bow and try not to cry. Backstage afterward, people lined up to meet her. They shared their own stories. A woman who'd lost her sister, a man who'd just been diagnosed with a serious illness, a teenager dealing with depression. All of them thanking her for making music that made them feel less alone. One person stood out. Jennifer Wu, the actress who'd sent that first message. She was there with tears in her eyes. "I had to come," Jennifer said, hugging Rachel like they were old friends. "Your music gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Thank you for being brave enough to share it." They talked for a while and Rachel realized something. These celebrities who'd shared her video, who'd cried over her music, they weren't different from anyone else. They were just people who felt things deeply and found solace in art that expressed those feelings. Over the next 6 months, Rachel performed at venues across the country. Small theaters, intimate clubs, college auditoriums. Each show sold out. Each audience connected with her music in that same deep way. Her EP released and immediately shot up the charts. Critics called it refreshingly honest and emotionally devastating in the best way. But the best reviews came from regular people commenting online about how the music had helped them through difficult times. Rachel kept working on new pieces. Some were about joy, about falling in love with music all over again. Some were about fear and self-doubt. She even wrote one about Mrs. Chen and the cafe, about the people who support you when you're at your lowest. She never forgot where she came from. Once a month, she still went back to the Blue Haven Cafe and played for anyone who happened to be there. No tickets, no announcement. Just Rachel and the old donated piano and whoever was around to listen. Mrs. Chen always made sure to serve her favorite coffee and sit in the front row. A year after the video went viral, Rachel was invited to perform at a prestigious music festival, the kind of event she used to dream about but never thought she'd actually experience. She was on a bill with some of the biggest names in music. Standing in the wings, waiting to go on, she felt that familiar fear rising. But this time it was different. She wasn't afraid of failing anymore. She'd already failed plenty of times, made mistakes, played wrong notes, written pieces that didn't work. And the world hadn't ended. If anything, those imperfections had made her more human, more relatable. She walked onto the stage in front of 5,000 people and felt calm. She sat at the piano, looked out at the massive crowd and smiled. "Hi," she said. "I'm Rachel. A couple years ago I was serving coffee and thought my dream was dead. Then something amazing happened. Not the viral video or the record deal or getting to play at incredible venues like this. The amazing thing was remembering why I fell in love with music in the first place." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Music isn't about being perfect. It's not about fame or success or impressing people. It's about connection. It's about taking the things we feel but can't put into words and giving them a voice. It's about reminding each other that we're not alone in whatever we're going through. She placed her hands on the keys. "This first piece is for my mom, who always believed I could do this. And for everyone who's ever given up on a dream because they were too scared to fail. I'm scared all the time, but I'm here anyway. And if I can do this, trust me, you can do whatever scary thing you've been putting off." She began to play, and 5,000 people fell silent to listen. Later that night, after the performance, after the interviews and the congratulations and the surreal experience of having famous musicians tell her they loved her work, Rachel sat alone in her hotel room. She pulled out her phone and looked at the original video. It was still there, still circulating, still finding new people who needed to hear it. 50 million views now. But the number didn't matter as much as what it represented. 50 million moments of connection. 50 million times someone had felt seen, understood, less alone. She thought about the waitress she'd been 2 years ago. Defeated, resigned, convinced her dreams were childish fantasies. If she could go back and tell that version of herself what was coming, she wouldn't believe it.